Hi there, I'm Nathan with Lovett Services. Recently, our marketing team sat down with our founder, Dale Lovett, and our current CEO, Gary Cosmer. It was a total run and gun shoot. All we did was set up a camera and let them talk candidly to see what we would get. We actually ended up learning a lot. So in this video, you're gonna hear the real history of how Lovett grew from a single truck to a regional leader. They discuss the unique partnership that drives our strategy and the unique systems we use to guarantee quality. It is raw and unscripted, but it really shows the heart of this company. Take a look.
You know, I would like to somehow tell the story of this morning we were talking like it took me until how many years was that? So we were partners in 2018, July of 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
June of 18, I think.
yeah, so 97 to 18 took me all those years to get to 15-ish million in revenue, and Gary coming on and having his skill set was able to, we doubled that in the last 7 years. You know, so that's pretty impressive. That's pretty neat. So it shows two different skill sets. I had the skill set to get us there. He's got the skill set to take us beyond. I don't have that skill set.
Talk about your skill set and how it differs in Dale's. And talk about because you're supposed your skill set is so specific. You are very focused, and not that you're not focused, but just
I think the best way to illustrate the difference in our skill sets is actually there's a book called Rocket Fuel that talks about the relationships between integrators and visionaries. And the concept about that is that an innovator and a visionary together are greater than the sum of each one added up. And that is absolutely the result of our relationship. And the book goes into specific relationships like Bowerman and Phil Knight, for example, at Nike. It talks about Steve Jobs, talks about a bunch of different folks that Elon Musk and Glenn Shotwell. All of those relationships are examples of a visionary working together with an integrator. I'm an integrator. Dale is a visionary. Both as far apart on those bookends as you can get. He's an extreme visionary and I'm an extreme integrator. And that just means that I am always longing for somebody to set vision far out there. And the more wacky and the more crazy it is, the more I like, because it allows me to try and bring it back in and figure out how we could actually do some of the crazy things. Now, half his ideas are dumb, but the other half are really, really good ideas. And I think that, it's illustrated by the growth over the last 7 years. The growth didn't come from me coming on board. The growth came from the magic that happens when you put a really good visionary together with a really good integrator. That's what caused the growth. And I think a perfect example of that is our acquisitions. If you look at my previous engagement when I was back in private equity, the last 5 years before coming to Lovett as a partner with Dale, I did 0 acquisitions. Now, I looked at lots of opportunities, but my risk profile did not allow me to move forward with those. And then you look at the acquisitions that we've done since 2018, which is, 4 acquisitions. And that's simply because Dale's visionary and his risk profile pushed me out of my comfort zone. And that allows us to hopefully find neutral buoyancy. Sometimes we lean one side or the other, but that's probably the best illustration of the magic behind a visionary and an integrator working together that I can think of. I grew up in Chicago, went to school in Southern Illinois, and that's also where I met my wife. And I kind of had this vision for being a life flight pilot. That's what I was going to do. I was going to be a helicopter pilot, and I was going to fly for life flight. And then that kind of evolved to wanting to be an attorney that was focused on aviation and really tailored my education to that. So that all changed my senior year of college when my father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And and he was an entrepreneur. And like most entrepreneurs, they have this vision that someday they're going to sell their company and they're going to make millions and millions of dollars. And because of that, they don't really need to build a standard retirement fund. They don't have 401ks like the rest of us do, because they're just like entrepreneurs. And every dollar they have, they're reinvesting and they're growing their business. Well, that put my mom in kind of a precarious situation when he passed away. And he passed away at 52, pretty young. And that changed all my plans, because instead of going and pursuing my passion for aviation, I jumped right in and figured out how to run the family business. And didn't know anything about that, hadn't really geared my education towards business, and just hit the ground running. And probably the most powerful educator and motivator is knowing that if I don't sell a certain amount by the end of the week, I'm not making payroll next week. So I learned sales first, kind of figured it out, and then I learned accounting and operations and so on and so forth. And I think I've always had a passion for operations, mostly because I just like to figure out the easiest way to do something, and the easiest way is normally also the most efficient. So did that for 3 or 4 years. And eventually was able to get that business packaged up and sold, which was also a great learning experience for me. And knowing that my mom was taken care of, I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do next. And a good friend of mine, one of my best friends that I grew up with, was out here on the West Coast working for Intel. And he said, "Hey, Gary, why don't you come out, and I think you'd really enjoy working for Intel. It's a really cool company. They're very progressive." And this was back in the 90s. And I think you'll really like the Northwest. So I came out, and he had gotten an interview scheduled for me. He got me into an interview with Intel. Came and I met at, I think it was the Hawthorne Farms campus. I got a tour of the campus and I met with all the folks there. And at the end of that visit, I knew 2 things. One, I knew that I didn't want to work for Intel. Not because it's a bad company or anything, but because I'm walking through this sea of cubicles and learning about all the different compartmentalized components of the business. And that is about anti-me as I can think of. I like to own between the bookends. I don't want to own a little piece of the puzzle. I want to own putting the whole puzzle together. And that philosophically was not the way Intel was structured. The other thing I learned is that I fell in love with the Northwest. And I went back home and I spent about a month thinking about it. And I sold everything I owned, and I packed up my car and I drove out here without a job. And when I got out here, I was living with my buddy that was working for Intel, and I had to figure out what to do. So one of the first jobs I had was I got a job with Husqvarna Power Equipment. And I was able to get my foot in the door with them because while I was in high school and college, I worked part-time as a small engine mechanic. Had nothing to do with any of my education. I just knew how to work on small engines. So I was able to wiggle my foot in the door doing that, and kind of grew in that organization, and eventually became responsible for all of the dealer network training and warranty arbitration for the Pacific Northwest. So my territories were down as far as Northern California, up as far as Northern Washington, out to Alaska, and on the Idaho border. That's a lot of geography to cover. So I had to figure out a way to touch all of these dealers without just getting in the car and driving around, and started looking at innovative ways to do that. And this was now the mid-90s. Windows 95 had just come out, and computer-based training was just kind of emerging. So I started kind of digging into computer-based training and ended up developing computer-based training programs for the dealer network that allowed us to be a lot more efficient and grow that business. I also learned a lot about sales through that process, which you wouldn't think would be would be naturally associated with the technical side, but in a lot of these mom and pop saw shops, the salesperson was also a mechanic. And trying to teach a mechanic how to sell was like pushing string. So instead, all I did was arm them with information. I created features and benefits that I shared with them about the Husqvarna power equipment. And once they understood the features and benefits and that they actually were better, they were naturally able to sell because they could just walk up to the wall and they could grab a chainsaw off the wall and they could walk somebody through what air injection was, or an outboard clutch, or any of the features that they had just learned about, and they could compare it to the other equipment on the wall, and lo and behold, the mechanic was now a salesperson. Well, later on, fast forward, that's helped me tremendously, because whether it's an ATM technician or a mitigation technician or a plumber or a drain tech, they're wired the same. They don't want to be salespeople. So helping them understand different ways to approach a consumer and sell has been very successful for us. And the origin of that was really working back in the day with those chainsaw mechanics, teaching them how to sell. So worked with Husqvarna for many years. And then I was hired by a publicly held company, and that company was in a completely different industry. They did photocopiers and ATM machines, and had a really eccentric boss there. And one of the things he did with the leadership team was every year he shuffled the deck, and everybody on the leadership team got assigned different responsibilities. And he did that because it gave him new and fresh ideas on how to run the business, and it also gave each member of the leadership team new exposure. They learned new things, and it kept them out of their comfort zone and made them hungry and made them drive. So one day I got the opportunity to sell the photocopy portion of that business. Didn't know anything about selling a business, so I figured it out, and that business was sold to a private equity firm out of California, and I was invited to go run that business as part of the sale transaction, which I also had never run a business before other than the distributorship that I ran right out of college, but no formal training how to be a CEO. Hit the ground running, figured it out as I went, and went to work for this private equity firm, and that kind of just one thing led to another, and I became a portfolio company manager, which I worked with private equity firms, worked with 4 now over my career, to identify acquisitions and purchase those acquisitions, and then come in and run them and improve the efficiency of them, and ultimately get them packaged up for sale. So I was doing that for almost 7 years before I met Dale. And he and I, and I'm sure he'll tell the story of how we met, but we became close friends way before we became business partners, for years, I think. And we talked about buying various businesses. I think we looked at 3 or 4. We looked at a pizza place or a chain of pizza restaurants that we were going to buy just as kind of something to do together. We looked at a company that assembles motorcycles and power, but we looked at all kinds of stuff during that process. And ultimately, I don't know which one of us figured it out, but ultimately we just decided that maybe we should do something together. And the timing was perfect because the private equity firm that I was working for at the time, the founder had just passed away, and he had passed it on to his children. And I did not agree with their philosophy where they were going with the business. I was in the process of trying to figure out what I want to do next. And that last engagement that I had was in aerospace manufacturing, mostly space applications. So as part of learning how to run that company, I started learning how to make it more efficient. And I got exposure to things like the Toyota manufacturing system and Six Sigma and tools and techniques that were really developed in order for us to bring manufacturing back on shore that had been offshore during the 90s. And one of the things that I was really curious about was how transferable would those tools and techniques be to a service business, because they're typically used in manufacturing. So I was really intrigued by Lovett, because Lovett is primarily a service business. We don't make anything here. We don't necessarily have any proprietary tools that we've developed. We don't have unique software that we've developed. We're a largely commoditized business. Plumbing is largely commoditized. Excavation is largely commoditized. The only difference could be efficiency brought to those commoditized processes. So the grand experiment for me was, can I take the Toyota-based manufacturing philosophies, the Toyota Kata, and the Six Sigma quality control components, and can I apply them to a service business and see if it allows us to go to market and command a similar price but with a higher margin, or a lower price with a similar margin, which should allow us to clown on our competition. And this has been an experiment that's been going on for about 7 years, and I would tell you that my experience is that between 70 and 80% of those tools and techniques from the Toyota system and the Six Sigma tools are transferable to a service business. So are we there yet? No, we continuously improve. That's the whole process around the Toyota system. But I'd say that Lovett runs much differently in a very unique way than pretty much any other service business you're going to stumble on. So that's kind of how I made it here, and what interests me most about this business. I didn't grow up in the trades like Dale did. I don't know much about plumbing or excavation. I'm more on the business and operations side, but that's also where we complement each other really well, because he intuitively can say, I think you should look at this, or I think you should look at that. He can do that just by driving into the lot most of the time. He doesn't need to dig into the numbers. He doesn't need to do a lot of analysis. He'll just say, hey, check out X, Y, or Z. And most of the time he's right. Like, he can see little puffs of smoke before I can pick them up by analyzing the numbers.
That's interesting. So just kind of a question, just as you were talking, can you explain like practically what the Toyota Kata system looks like for Lovett, like a couple examples of just practically what that looks like?
So the Toyota manufacturing system is really based on efficiency. It uses some techniques that are referred to as lean, and it ranges across the board. So for example, in inventory, we use something called Kanban inventory. And the Kanban inventory is a very simple inventory system that allows us to set up bins for our technicians, and the bins have a certain amount of inventory in them, and they know when one bin is empty, they pull a card, they put the card in the mailbox. We got a guy that drives around on a little golf cart once a day, and he picks up those cards and he's reordering. They start taking inventory out of the bin in the back, and by the time the bin in the back is out of inventory, we know the lead times for the inventory to be replenished. The new inventory will have showed up and both bins get replenished. So the advantage to that is now we have better ordering quantity. We have economic ordering quantities, so we order more, or we can order more efficiently. The thing that inspired me to implement Kanban inventory was I was out in the field on a job site, and I showed up on the job site and I couldn't find the foreman. And it turns out the foreman had left the job site to go buy batteries. So he had 3 people waiting for him to come back because he needed batteries for his laser. So I got the labor of 3 guys waiting around for him to go get batteries. He spent $5.99 for 2 batteries, which was probably 110%, 150% more than what batteries cost. And it was terribly inefficient. So that was what inspired me to move forward with Kanban inventory. Since then, that hasn't happened. So that's one technique in inventory. In sales, we use a process that's based on tact time. So when we write a bid, the bid is very discrete steps. If you're going to put new pipe in the ground, you have to dig the old pipe up, you have to bed, you have to put the new pipe in, you have to do compaction, it gets filled, it gets covered up. All of those steps have labor hours attached to them in the bid. And as soon as that bid is awarded and it moves into operations, or what we call flow, then in the field, we have foremen that have iPads, and they are keeping track with that tack time to see how are we doing against the bid. And that allows us to know whether we're going to command the margin we thought we were for that project. It also helps us make sure that we get that work done in a reasonable amount of time so that we can get on to the next project and we're not late for that. So that would be another example around scheduling. We use a concept called andon, which is based on a color system of red, blue, or green. And we have andon meetings every week or every 2 weeks with each department, where we have very specific items that we go through, and they identify whether we are red, which means we would be behind our master production schedule, or we have a work stoppage type of a situation where we need to create an action item for one or more people. We are blue, which means we're on track, or we're green, which means we're ahead of schedule, which we also want to understand if there's efficiencies that we just learned and developed that we need to pass those down into the organization to other processes. So that's really what the Toyota manufacturing system does, and the use of it is called the Toyota Kata. Six Sigma is a different system, but coupled very closely. So the Toyota system really focuses on operations and efficiency. Six Sigma really focuses on quality. So they work together in concert to make sure that you're doing things as efficient as you possibly can, and your quality is within acceptable margins. Now, acceptable margins seems like a little strange choice of words, because everybody would say, well, you want to have the highest possible quality you can all the time. That is actually not true, because if I provided the highest possible quality I could, you couldn't afford to pay for it. That would be a zero defect environment. And that's one thing that I also learned during my time in aerospace manufacturing. When I was in aerospace, sometimes it demanded that, right? Zero defect, which means when we manufactured something, we may have had to make 50 of them to get one perfect part. And that meant that if you were the customer, you had to pay for 50 parts in order to get that perfect part. Now, we try and keep our error rate down in the 2% or below range. That's our target condition for that. And we do a pretty good job at it. And instead of charging for zero defect, we focus our energy on making sure that when we do have a defect that occurs within that 2%, we do an amazing job of taking care of our customers and making it right. And that's way cheaper for them, and it's way better for us.
I just realized as I looked out this window how my forecasting used to be a little bit different than it is now. I would go to this window.
No, it's pretty much still the same.
Well, mine is, yeah, different than yours. But as an entrepreneur before Gary, I mean, I would literally day after day look out these windows and look over the entire yard. And if it was empty, I knew it was going to be good. If it was full, it was going to be bad. And that was a big part of projections, real. And that's real. Like that's how I managed to build a business from 0 to 15 million. Kind of funny, huh? That just blows your mind probably, but that's an entrepreneur's thinking. Yeah, it just came to mind. I thought, I think it started as a kid, just being an entrepreneur, in my mind, always trying to, figure out how I could make money, turn $5 into $10, and so I always knew that I wanted to be a business owner. I thought, I wrote a letter to myself in high school because it was part of a project for, I think junior year. I have the letter, but I said when I was 30 years old that I was going to be, have this big business. I'd be sitting with my feet up doing nothing. Was I wrong? Boy, was I wrong. It was not nearly that easy. But I didn't know what I was going to do, and so I just had a job doing excavation for a small shop here in town, and small family business. And I just decided, hey, I think I can do this. So after about 3 years of doing excavation, I started doing side projects and weekends, and Eventually, I was making probably twice as much after hours than I was at work. And so that gave me enough security to quit my job and do it full time. So that was 1997. And I remember, I think I got my CCB, my contractor's license, in October of 97. And my first real job was the week before that, in the end of September, where I traded a sewer line. I made a connection, a house on 112th or 113th in Northeast Portland. 113th had to be connected to the sewer line, or the main sewer line in the street, and I traded that connection for a pickup truck and went to work. The rest is history.
Okay. Tell me about one big movement at Lovett while you were running things that really changed the momentum for the company.
Yeah, that's easy. It was luck on my part, and not so lucky on MRP. Was a company that was probably the biggest service company in town, and they closed the doors one day. And so I had a bunch of relationships over there, so we did a bunch of work over there, and there were a bunch of good guys there, and I was my phone was blowing up all of a sudden. Within about a 10-minute span, I had several people calling me looking for a job because they just found out, that morning. So I don't think they had even left the meeting. They were texting and calling. And so we brought on Mike Sminia. May have been the first one. He's still here today. That's been 15-ish years or something. I'm not sure exactly, but right around 15 years. Boy, how lucky was it for us to be able to get Mike that day. And he's been great. We got a handful of other guys at the same time. Well, so not only did we get some really good people, but all those customers had to get a new contractor. So we got a lot of work out of that too. So I would say there's been lots of times over the years that we propelled up in business, but that was the single biggest one.
Tell me about how your mindset changed in the business from just having a company here that did services to you really caring about people and filling buckets and making a difference in their lives.
Oh, well, that happened as a kid. I just was always like that. So that was just something I brought into the business. Matter of fact, for a lot of years, I was so selfless that I hardly had any money left over for myself. I just typically was giving it all away, and at some point, and I don't remember what year that was, but at some point I had to say, gosh, if I don't be a little selfish here, I'm not going to have a business, because I literally gave away, and I was prideful to give away money, right? I was prideful to make sure my guys were paid well, but it didn't leave enough for me, so I had to start finding a balance, and that actually probably didn't really start going. I didn't probably 45 or so when I was really starting to find that balance well, which was maybe 10 years ago.
You guys are both obviously very different people. We talked a lot about work. We talked a lot about your pasts. Tell us about when you're not at work. What are some of the things that you, Gary, like to do when you're not at work, when you have clocked off for the day? What are some of the interests that you have outside of Lovett and outside of the companies?
Well, I've got a couple different passions that I've been involved with either continuously or off and on for the past, 20 years, maybe longer. I'm an amateur racer. I race top speed, land speed cars. So those are kind of similar to drag racing, but it happens on an airstrip. And we just try and see how fast we can go in a half mile on the airstrips. And I've been doing that for, probably over 10 years, probably 15 years now, messing around with that. My father-in-law and I, with the help of some friends, built our own race car about 5 years ago. He just turned 86, and I really enjoy bringing him to the races and seeing his passion around it, and that's time that we spend together. And it's really about the memories of spending time with him as much as it is the racing or anything else. I'm also aviation enthusiast, and have really been flying since I think I got my pilot's license in 1991. So I've kind of been off and on with flying for quite a while, but most recently, actually, Dale inspired me to get back into it in, 2021 or so, and started flying again and really got a passion for backcountry and off-airport mountain flying, and currently building an airplane that's really catered to that, and looking forward to flying it in some competitions next year with something called the National Stall Series. So when I'm not working, I'm either working on my race car or working on my airplane. And for me, it's self-care also, because it requires so much concentration. I can't allow my mind to be clouded with anything that's going on at work, because, as a business owner, there's always some new problem around the corner. There's a whirlwind of activity that's happening all the time. And I believe if you don't create some sort of an outlet that lets you not be plugged into that, it's not healthy. So that's my form of self-care. It forces me to slow down. It forces me to just be very, very focused at a hyper level. And I thoroughly enjoy it.
Dale, how about yourself?
Well, what's funny is both of our passions are really doing things that involves adrenaline, speed, horsepower, and that's actually how we met. Gary doesn't remember it. I think I told you, had to have known, yeah. So I remember I was driving, talking to a friend, and I was almost home, just blocks away. And what was that car you had?
Nissan GTR.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, tell my buddy Kenny that I'm talking to, I'm like, oh, there's a GTR in my neighborhood. And he's like, oh, it's probably Gary Cosmer. And I was like, who's that? Oh, blah, 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 whatever he said. And I said, would you introduce us? And that was it. He introduced us, and we've been friends ever since. And I don't remember what year that was, but it's got to be
2013, maybe 2014,
12 years-ish or something. So time goes fast, but yeah. So it was cars that brought us together, right? And so yeah. Well, he and I've been, doing all kinds of adrenaline junkie stuff outside of work since then, whether it's side by sides and playing in the sand or just screwing around with dirt bikes or whatever the heck it was, crashing. What were the quadcopters we were flying all the time, or what have you. But
between the time that you guys met and Gary, you took over as kind of like the lead here, what were you guys up to together? How did you kind of come to that decision to go in on Lovett together? Like, tell that story.
I'm going to tell the story because you'll tell it way too long.
Okay. Deal.
And you said, don't let me talk too much. So I'm not.
Perfect.
So yeah, not remembering what year it was that we met, there was probably 5 years or something-ish before we decided to be in business together. But, gosh, Gary and I he worked in Albany, so we had like an hour and a half drive home every day. And when I'd leave the office, I'd call him and we'd talk for probably an hour every day while we were both driving, just BSing. And so we talked about anything and everything all the time. And so we spent a lot of time, doing things on the weekends together, whatever that was, messing around because we like similar hobbies. Neither one of us is into sports unless it involves gasoline. So, we were very like-minded. Neither one of us sat in front of a TV. I don't have one. And he'd hardly ever watch TV, so we'd be doing something. So, yeah, then it was 2018 that we got serious talking about being partners in this business, and that probably took us, 3 to 6 months or something to hash that out. And July of 2018, we signed a deal, and he came in here and was like, holy shit, what did I get into? And it took him a little while to straighten it out, probably 6-12 months or something before he started getting control over it, I would say. And at that time, I still had CEO title. He came in as COO and partner. And I don't remember how many years it was, but it was just a few years. What I wanted to do was make sure that everybody here was going to be comfortable with Gary, and they were. And then Gary took the CEO title, and he runs it much better than I ever could have, by far.
That's great.
I'd say differently. I don't know.
It's much shorter than you would have told the story. Yeah. It's much better because I work less.
Well, that's true.
Gary, how was that for you, like stepping into this role and like the transition from private equity and all of that?
It was very different. I think the one thing when you really step into the role of ownership, probably more than private equity, I guess I always had that backdrop in my mind working either in publicly held companies or in private equity, that if things really got bad, I could just leave the keys on the table and say, sorry, it didn't work out. And when you write that check and you become a business owner and you have a whole different level of commitment. You can't necessarily just leave the keys on the table because the problems are still there the next day and you own them. So I think that was probably the biggest change for me. And the sense of responsibility to the team is the same. Like, I think once you step into the role of CEO, you take on an enormous amount of responsibility for everybody that is in your charge. So that didn't really change all that much. The ownership and ability to not walk away, or inability to walk away, is probably the biggest change for me. As far as the business itself, very different. Very different. I kind of came up through more of a corporate environment. There was more programs and leadership training and folks that had all different types of levels of education. And coming here to this organization, there's a lot of folks that, you know, they were a laborer and one day their boss didn't show up, so then they became the foreman. And they didn't necessarily get a chunk of training that went with that, so they had to figure it out as they went. And then one day the superintendent didn't show up, so now they became the superintendent. And some of them, you know, made it into the role of business unit managers and didn't really, you know, they were winging it and they were doing a great job, but they didn't have that formal education. They didn't know their way around an income statement. They didn't understand metrics. They didn't understand the difference between IQ and EQ, like all of those things that are really required as leaders. And we had to retract a little bit and get them that skill. They're great people, right? You don't just cast them off. You have to just get them that education. And that took us a little while. You know, that was probably about a 3-year process for us to get to the level where we had common baseline and common terminologies. And actually the Toyota system helps with that. And we also lean pretty heavily on the speed of trust. It's the foundation element for our business. It's based on 13 trust behaviors. And the rule is you don't have to use those to manage and operate in the business, but if you don't, you can't work here. So all of that had to be institutionalized in order for us to achieve the growth that we have achieved over the last 7 years. I'd like you to talk about, because you haven't really talked about your innovator, all right? And one of the things, at least the story I've heard, I've never vetted it with you, is that you actually are one of the pioneers of using directional drills for sewer lines. Maybe you could talk about how you discovered that need and then figured out the tools and kind of did that. Because my understanding is you were like if not the first in this region.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly if I was the first or not, or if I just grabbed it from somebody who had done it a couple of times and ran with it. I don't remember that, but yeah, I got a couple of friends that were pretty upset at me about it that are in the business because I not only that was I using that tool to do stuff that others weren't doing was I was teaching everybody in the city how to do it. And so, the old school method was to use this boring machine that you just pointed and hope that it popped out. We called it a poke and hope, because you poke it in and just hope it comes, because you can't steer it, you can't direct it, you just get it in perfectly where you want it to go and you set it on its way, and now we can steer, when we bore. But people weren't doing that. So I taught everybody in the city that they could do it, so now everyone does it now. But in that meantime, before everybody started doing it, I was able to capture, quite a bit of profit. That's change, right? That's what happens. That's evolution. And so I had some people upset at me when I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, I was able to make a lot of money during that time, But before that, pipe bursting was something that wasn't used much, and we started doing that. I built several different pipe bursting machines, and we did a lot of pipe bursting. I mean, so much when nobody was doing it, and we were doing that for everyone before everyone was doing it. And so made a lot of money on that too. So those were the two things I would say that I was doing innovative.
Can you explain what pipe bursting is?
Yeah, pipe bursting is where you send a machine through an existing old, maybe fractured pipe, and at the same time you're dragging a new pipe right behind it. And as soon as the machine pops out at your other hole, you disconnect the machine and the pipe's in the ground. You just cut it and make connections. So yeah, it was very innovative 25 years ago. It's only been around, well, it's probably been around longer than that, but it was for big municipal projects and such, and it was still very, very rare. One other innovative thing that came to mind was, in this business, it wasn't something typical to be doing the kind of marketing style that I was doing. You see our vehicles now as go down the road. There's a van that's typically, says Lovett from one tip to the other, and that wasn't something that was done. And, my marketing guys that would be making these stickers for me, it was all I could do to get them to make them as big as I wanted to. They'd say, it's not supposed to be that big. It doesn't look right. I'm like, I don't care. Make it this big. And so I fought with the marketing guys for years, but I took up all that real estate, as big as you could make it and as high on the vans as possible. So going down the freeway, you could see them. And so that's worked out really well. At the same time, at this very table, I remember pulling in all of my team. There was probably 20 estimators and leadership, and I'm sitting at the end of this table and this whole room's full, and I tell them that I've got this window sticker thing I'm going to do for marketing, and I'm going to have competitions. And everybody here looked at me with like deer in the headlights look. I don't know how many words were spoken in that room. It lasted about 10 or 15 minutes. They all thought I was crazy and I was wasting their time. And we all walked out here, and I was like, well, they don't see what I do. I'm going to do it anyway, right? I don't care. And it became massive success. And so, for several summers in a row, we had window sticker competitions, where we put out a prize for somebody to go take a Lovett sticker that was 12 or 14 inches long and get it on a car, send in a photo with the license plate, and we would tag that as one, and we'd see who could get the most out. And at the same time, it created a lot of excitement where people they just wanted to have a sticker. So they'd ask and we'd mail them one. And so that was a massive Lovett sticker blast for, probably 5 to 6 years, something like that. And, at the same time we were having, hoodies and giveaways and a lot of Lovett swag, and the brand was cool and it looked neat, and it still does. And so we still do, a lot of giveaways, and it was neat to see the just a lot of the community get involved in those competitions and have fun with it. And there was a couple of kids that were pretty impressive in the way they go get it done, and so it was neat to watch that and just see it all over social media at the same time, because social media was still fairly new when we were doing that, but that was innovative.
Tell us about unwinding some of the unintended consequences of that. Because my understanding is some ended up on Southwest Airlines airplanes and squad cars and...
Yeah, never any trouble or anything, but, get a lot of phone calls from cars driving reckless, and we're like, we don't know who it was, it's not a Lovett vehicle if somebody has a sticker on there, sweatshirts, boy, we had a lot of homeless wearing Lovett hoodies for a long time, but yeah, there was kind of like unspoken competitions to see where you could get a Lovett sticker. Well, we actually did have a competition or two, the best placed Lovett sticker, and one guy sent in one day. He was on the river camping, and he had a 5-gallon bucket with a Lovett sticker on it, and he had his pants down and was sitting on it, defecating with a book or something. Oh my God. And it was funny. It was hilarious. And then we put it on a Christmas card that year because it was so hilarious. And we got a letter from some lady who was she was so upset. She thought it was the least professional thing. So she didn't have a sense of humor, but we did.
Both of you have talked about being entrepreneurs and what that means to you and how that's come about in your lives. What is one piece of advice you could give to a younger entrepreneur that's looking to maybe get into a business similar to you guys or just starting out for themselves?
Simple answer for me. Don't wait. That's the biggest thing. People just wait. Like they want everything to be perfect. You don't need it to be perfect. You just need to go.
I guess I would say two things. One, figure out whether you are a visionary or an integrator. Don't try and be both. And don't feel like you have to be the expert at everything. Find experts and surround yourself with great people. We figured out the right recipe for a culture that works. And we're pretty darn close to having a recipe for our business. And all we're going to do is take those two and we're going to put them together and we're going to keep expanding, reproducing that model. And that includes organic growth in the markets we're already in and inorganic growth into the markets that we're not in yet.
So guys, maybe another question we could ask you about is, Lovett's culture, and a lot of times Lovett's sacrifice of profit for the culture here. Dale, Gary, can you guys expand on that for me?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier where it started from was I've always just had a huge heart, and so been a selfless individual. So law of attraction says you attract others like yourself. So ended up with an organization that was very selfless, and so that culture started out earlier. I mentioned earlier that at some point, maybe 10-ish years ago, I had to realize that I needed to find a balance and not be completely selfless, or the business wouldn't continue. Need to have profit. It's the blood, and so I think we have a good balance of that now. But when it comes to people, for sure, and there's a choice that has to be made. And it comes to profit or people, the people are always chosen. That's pretty important. And so I think that that comes through pretty loudly to employees, and that means a lot.
Can you talk at all about the big culture change of bringing the employees into it, simply behind maybe the biggest movement would you feel is the How Full Is Your Bucket book and your implementation of that into the company?
Yeah, so I don't remember what year, but I had to, let me think. What year was it, Sawyer?
2013.
2013. You remember that, huh?
12 or 13, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this How Full Is Your Bucket book, which I almost forgot about. So it was a requirement. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So it was a required reading when somebody would start here. You sat down and read this book, took you about an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on how fast a reader you were. It's just a small book, but you sat down on the clock and read the book. and the concept of how full is your bucket is, when you do kind things to people, you put a drop in their bucket, and if you do something mean, you remove from their bucket. And the idea is that someone always has a full bucket. So it's a very simple, almost childlike, book and concept, but very real. So that was the culture of just making sure that we were kind to others, and we had the balance right, that you weren't dipping from their bucket.
Along with the bucket book and some of the other cultural aspect things here, can you guys expand for me, Gary or Dale, on the use of the CVI tool and what's that done for Lovett, and how has that helped shape how you react, respond, and kind of...
You want a long answer or a short answer?
It's up to you. It could be a shorter answer.
Well, that'll depend who answers it.
That's why I'm asking.
How about a medium length answer?
Medium, huh? Well, how about we both do? I'll start out. You jump in and interrupt me at any time. Sure. So I was introduced to the Core Value Index, the CVI, by Travis Stovall. Boy, this is 15 years probably or so. And for those of you that don't know what it is, it's similar to like DISC or
Myers-Briggs, DISC, the Cultural Index. There's 5 or 6 of them out there.
Yeah, they're all similar yet different. And so Travis brought that here, showed it to me, and when I first took the test, I was just blown away. I mean, I took this test in less than 10 minutes, and it knew me so well. And so I started having people around me and people at the company, take the CVI, and it was mind-blowing that you could learn so much about a person. And so as Travis educated me and I read everything I could about the book and I started using it in practice and using it with every employee, I started to get educating on it so well that I can't go anywhere without seeing, through my CVI lens, everywhere I go now. And so I've gotten so good at it now, I can usually tell what somebody is, or closely just by watching and interacting with them. So that's made a big difference for people here that get educated on it, because you're able to work together much better. If you take somebody who's, like a engineer type, highly detailed, accountant type personality, versus me, we don't speak the same language, I know when I'm working with somebody or communicating with somebody on that level that I have to slow way down. I try to repeatedly ask them, am I giving you all the information you need? Because I will speak in bullet points and they want every single little detail. I don't operate like that. So miscommunicating, I miscommunicate with that type of personality the most. And so having learned over the years, I've been able to minimize that, not perfect it, but minimize it quite a bit. It's been a huge, huge value. And then somebody's negative conflict strategy. So, you start seeing it, and all of a sudden you could stop really quick and be like, okay, I've got them in their negative conflict strategy. I'm doing something wrong. I need to adjust my conversation. And you can adjust real time, and it allows people to get along versus the opposite. And so huge impact at work, but huge impact in my personal life. It's been one of my favorite things, actually, that's come into my personal and business career. And I don't want to speak for Gary, but I think the same, because he learned about it, shortly after that when I introduced it to him. And then he got educated just like I am, and because he was super curious. And so we talked about it a lot for years and years when we were first learning about it. And so now it's just part of who we are, as a company.
I think, as Dale said, he introduced it to me. I've used it at 3 or 4 companies now. And I think it is a secret weapon. It's that powerful. It is a strategic tool. I use it a little bit differently than he does, I think, but I find that I try and find what I call pointy people and a square organization. So I look for folks that are exceptional in one quadrant of the core value index. And then I try and balance out the organization so the organization is very squared up. And that really ranges at the micro level from putting together a project team where I want to have cross-representation of all the different CVI core values, all the way up to the company as a whole. We inventory everybody's CVI. It's part of our playbook. Every single person in the organization gets a playbook that has everybody's CVI. And that allows us, as Dale said, to interact and communicate better together. And it really has been a game changer for the organization. And I'd say the combination of the trust behaviors, the CVI, and believe it or not, the love languages, those are the triangulation of our culture that is absolutely critical to our success.
The conference room in the other room has, what do we have, 13 or 14 plaques up on the wall now of 10-year employees. That's a pretty proud moment. We just had 2 a week ago. So I didn't think I'd get emotional over it, but there's a lot of pride. So, and you don't have people that stick around that long if you're not good to them. Didn't mean to go that place, guys. Jeez, didn't think I would. I'm surprised I did, but that was the first thing that came to mind when you started talking about it. You know, I couldn't really answer you specifically, you know, about what things you do for someone. It's not,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of times it's when they really need you, you know, and it's just, well, yeah, go do it, whatever it is, you know. A lot of times that's what it is versus the day-to-day stuff. But it's really just how you treat people. You know, do you just treat them like they're a number and you don't care about them, or do you treat them like they're people?
Yeah.
I don't really do a very good job of differentiating between my work family and my home family, so I kind of treat everybody the same way, and it's a double-edged sword because my standards for the folks I work with are the exact same standards I would have for my family at home, and you know, that can be kind of tough sometimes. I would say that I've got folks that I work with here that I've worked with for certainly over a decade, some of them almost 20 years now. 2 that come to mind are Shane and Brian Pritchett, who work here at Lovett. When I first met Shane, I think he was 24 years old, and I remember the first time we worked together, I had to figure out how to get him a rental car because he wasn't old enough to have a rental car. And I think Shane just turned 40. It's just amazing to see that team, see that all of them grow and mature and become not only professionals, but also see them become parents and see them like just raise their kids and see how well they have done. And that's a really prideful thing for me. So yeah, good. I get a little emotional thinking about that also.
Yeah, we were just at our annual Christmas party at the bowling alley, and it's my favorite moment of the year when it comes to work because all those families bring their kids come, and there's one, Jaime, for example, he's been with us 22 or 23 years or something right now, you know, and he brings his family. Well, we've watched him since they were born, you know. Watched him buy his first house. He still has that house. He's watched him buy multiple houses. You know, that's a lot of pride, you know, and to see, you know, just about every one of those 13 people that are on that wall over there were at the party with their families that you've watched most all of them grow up, you know, and their spouses and such. And that's pretty special.
I hope you enjoyed that look behind the curtain. It's fascinating to see how that integrator visionary dynamic that Gary and Dale talked about actually plays out in real life. We went from the early days of poke and hope drilling all the way to implementing aerospace efficiency standards like Six Sigma and Toyota Kata. That level of operational detail is exactly why we can offer such high quality service. But as you just heard, it really all comes back to Lovett's culture and its people. Whether it's filling buckets or celebrating employees who have been with us for 10 plus years, that's the secret sauce that makes us who we are. If you're looking for a partner that combines that level of care with a high level of efficiency, we are ready to help. Thanks again for watching.